Welcome, everyone. So the way this debate will go is that we will first ask some specific individual questions on each of your specific research, and then we will have a more general conversation, and then you can all chime in. You can, respectfully, of course, chime in on the speech of or the things that the other person is saying in the debate, so feel free to really pick in on that. All right? So, Miss, where is my cards? Da, 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 da. Have them all scrambled up. Oh, God, yes. Finally, it's always the last one. Ms. Khundakji, I'm sorry for the wait. So ITF is trying to negotiate agreements and is also succeeding with companies in the gig economy. Now, often there's a lot of resistance with unions to engage with those companies. What motivates ITF specifically to engage with them?
Thank you, Valeria, and thanks to BTB for inviting us to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with one of our biggest and strongest affiliates. So in the ITF, we represent transport workers across all the different sectors. We talk about more than 16 million transport workers around the world. And we have a history in terms of negotiating and talking to companies. We recognize that in order to set international standards, we have to be sitting with companies and employers and have those negotiations to look at improving conditions for transport workers. And if we want to talk specifically about gig and technology and AI, we have been facing a lot of challenges around the question of why are we talking to gig companies if they're not recognizing the workers as employers specifically. And this debate was going on for around 4 years. But what we said is the landscape of that sector is growing in a way that we cannot simply ignore. This business model is going in a direction that if we don't start talking, if we don't have dialogue with these companies, we will not be able to improve the working conditions of the people in that sector. So the employment classification remains an issue. It will always be, at least for the time being. But that doesn't mean that we don't talk about improving other benefits and conditions for those workers. And if we're looking at numbers, it's expanding in a way. I mean, I was looking at the recent reports by the ILO. In the past decade, we've seen a 5-fold increase in the number of platform workers across the world. The biggest being in the US, and then, of course, Europe, and then going further into India and other countries. When Uber, they're not here now, but I'm sure they're coming back, they say that by the end of this year, they will have 10 million workers on their app. This is a number we cannot simply ignore. So what our agreement basically did with Uber is to set the door for any of our unions or affiliates who feel that on national level, they can use this opportunity and talk to the company on national level to improve their working conditions. Having, as I said, we still have the ongoing disagreement about the classification of these workers. So this is an example of why we're doing this. Now, the biggest challenge, and I referred to some of the conversations earlier, is the lack of regulations in this sector, or when it comes to technology generally. We don't have any frameworks that sets the terms and conditions of these workers. So we have to step in. We have to have a voice when it comes to improving workers' conditions in those sectors and the introductions of AI and so on. We cannot allow for a machine to set the rules for workers. We cannot have a machine that says you're not supposed to be working anymore because you're 5 minutes late. It's these kind of issues that are important, and basically the people live it on day-to-day basis without having the human element to address these issues. So these are all things that the ITF has been doing for a long time. It's just a different business model with different kind of issues, I'm not going to use another terminology, that we need to address. And this is why we're doing that. In terms of support, there's a big shift. There were some unions, as I said before, who weren't convinced. But I think a lot of those unions have shifted in terms of realizing the importance. If we don't do that, who will?
Yes, absolutely right. I think maybe Ms. Gabriels can talk some more about that, about the legal framework, on how important it is to start really applying a legal framework to new emerging technologies.
Yes, the problem is, of course, that AI is universal, is global, and setting a global framework will probably not be possible. Europe has already the AI Act, also a nice framework, but it's not enough. I think it's very important, like you also said, that we have on a company basis, we can have a collective bargaining and set the rules via the collective bargaining and therefore via the unions, but also on a federal or on a sectoral level. Because it is different, for example, in transport and logistics, it can be very different than, for example, in schools or on another workplace. It's not the same. AI goes into every level and every sort of job in every workplace. So the way HI is used by, for example, HR, human resources, it is very different than it is used, for example, in transport. For example, what the previous persons and lecturers also told, for example, for the fatigue, to do something against fatigue, it can be very important that you have, for example, eye recognition and stuff like that, AI that can feel if you are losing your attention. Is very important, for example, in transport. But it can also be used in another way, for example, for more HR facts. You can use it, for example, to monitor also employees. And then it becomes another story.
To have real-time performance evaluations.
Yes, evaluations. And if you have in the end on the end of the chain or in the decision making, there is no human intervenience anymore and no empathy, because AI, whatever you say, it has no empathy, no real empathy. The empathy it has will be learned to the system. It has no real empathy. So you still have to have the human in control principle. And not only the human in control, but also the worker in control. And the union, therefore, social dialogue is very important in every sector. And there is no legislation, no sufficient legislation at the moment, but it's also because it is going so fast. But it's like going on a train. If you don't jump on it now, it will pass.
I would like to quickly hook into, I know it's not really the essence of what you were saying, but I'd like to quickly hook into what you said, is that an AI per definition does not have empathy. Now, going to play the devil's advocate here, there are also people that have no empathy. Mm-hmm. And then again, you could actually program empathy. So is that maybe something that we should look into, and to the algorithms, that they should maybe be more programmed with more empathy in them?
I think it was ChatGPT who had become, it asked questions for more empathy, to create more empathy, to see how you feel. And the system is asking you how you feel with some decision or with something you gave them. It is also a very polite system, so yeah. But it is artificial, and we forget, people forget it too, that it is artificial intelligence. It is not real intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's something that is put in a system. And okay, it can learn from itself, and it can, but you see, for example, if you ask questions, it's not specifically union-like, but if you ask questions to the system, it depends on which system. It's an American system or a Chinese system. Depending on the question you ask, you will get a different answer, and certain answers you will never get. So that points out it's not so neutral.
Yeah, I would like to add something to
Yes,
that,
of
because
course.
I think it is also very difficult to program empathy. Because can you explain how you feel as a person that you feel empathy? It's difficult, I think, in the first place to program that, and secondly, if it's a system that keeps on learning on the basis of data and input from human people who are using the system, the question is where the system will end, I think. The question is it then indeed a feeling of empathy, or is it just a reflection of the persons who are giving feedback to the system and saying like, okay, this is empathy? I think that's very difficult to
Yes,
define.
very fair. You were first. I saw a reaction
I
first.
was just going to comment on what both my co-panelists said. It's linked to empathy is also the human. We heard fatigue a lot, but I didn't hear anything from our earlier interventions on what does that mean in terms of mental health and well-being when people are having a camera on top of their head as long as they're in their workplace. Yes, there is a very strong safety element. We all recognize that. But this element of being monitored, being under surveillance, every minute they start, since they switch on until they switch off, they're under supervision. How is this impacting on the mental well-being of the people? Is this being considered under the occupational health and safety of the work that we're doing? So there's a lot of things that is beyond just the fact that we want to be more productive. We want to be a safer workplace, but there's the also other human side of this conversation.
Yeah, and it might be a little bit different when you actually have the statistics on that and when you have the live performance evaluations, because I think every boss knows that you will probably check Facebook or Instagram or whatever during your hours, that you will probably send a message or maybe even make a call, but then actually seeing it in statistics may be very stressful for workers.
Mostly it always has a positive side and a negative side, and it's like a mirror. So, and for example, with Amazon, the workers are changed very often because a lot of people cannot handle the constant control, the constant monitoring, even as far as how many times you go to the toilet, for example. It's just not good for your mind and everything. So I think, and also the social contact between employees and workers, it's very important. And the more you get machines, the more you get AI in machines, the value of social contact and the fact that we are human beings that need that to survive.
And the biggest challenge in terms of our trade union world is we've been approached a lot by our affiliates saying, how do we organize this group of workers? That's another challenge. So it's not just the introduction of technology, it's them being so dispersed and working by an app that unions are unable to organize them anymore. Hence, it's influencing our collective power, our workers' voices on the ground. So there's so many links to the conversation as well. It has been only recently when unions, as I said, because of the numbers, are recognizing we cannot leave this sector outside and just stick to the traditional sectors, to the traditional collective bargaining conversations. If we don't do this, what happens to the movement?
It also opens the discussion about who we want to represent as unions, which workers.
And can you answer that question? Do
I
you
think
have
we
an
have
idea?
to be more open to that. So we have, it will also be freelancers or independent people. I know it's perhaps not popular, but if we want to be of any meaning, we will have to make the people we represent much larger, the group much larger.
So as work diversifies, it's also the groups of people that
Yes.
you will represent
Yes.
that also
Yes.
logically has to diversify. Okay, I would like to apologize because we haven't been able to come to your research first, so now we will dive into that. So Simon, you recently wrote a publication on risk-based approach to well-being at work in AI, what we were talking about, and robotization. What were your key insights and conclusions?
I think it overlaps a little bit what we already discussed, but I think it's good to repeat it a little bit because it's important. I think if you read all the science, the research and social sciences on the impact of AI, and what the main part of my research entailed was robotization, so working with smart robots, the moment when AI gets introduced in physical machines. And if you look at that kind of literature and expertise, they all come to the same conclusion. Actually, technology can have both consequences, positive and negative. It is not that technology is deterministic, and it has potential to affect or impact every aspect of the work. We already discussed surveillance, but also, for instance, if an algorithm or a system determines the working pace of people, saying like, these are the objectives that you have to reach, then it can create a lot of pressure on the mental health of people. Of course, on the other hand, there's the argument, also what we heard this morning from the people from Uber, that it can also have like positive consequences for the autonomy of people. So I think that's why it's important to have that discussion as well, because now we are still in control. The humans are still in control. The trade unions, the employers are still in control. So we can determine what the consequences will be of technology, from AI, of robots, and so on. So I think that's an important aspect. Another aspect is, of course, that there are a lot of risks, for instance, related to the loss of control, that people feel that they have to work with an autonomous system and that they cannot be in control of doing their work, performing their work. So that also creates a lot of workload on the mental aspect of people.
And maybe some sort of like labor existentialism, like what is my job even anymore?
It's more because that they have to work together with an autonomous system that is saying you have to do your job like that, and you have to follow the algorithm, and then it feels like, okay, I'm getting the feeling to lose control about my job. So that's why I think it's important that we pay attention to these aspects, to these consequences of technology in the workplace, and that we also, as trade unions, it's important that they work together, try to work together as well to meet these positive consequences, because it has a lot of potential, of course, technology, but at the moment you can see that it's being used for monitoring of workers, what you already said. So it's important that we are aware of the positive consequences as well. So that's the main part I want to.
But of course, we are also a little bit worried. How could we, for instance, protect workers of routine or repetitive tasks against layoffs because of AI?
Yeah. So I think it's important to be aware that in my research, I'm also a labor lawyer, so I'm looking at it from a legal perspective, and I try to use the existing legal framework to find some connections, principles that we can use.
Is there any?
And I think, in my opinion, there is, but they are not being used. For instance, we have a framework directive on occupational safety and health, and it provides explicitly that workers have to be informed and trained when new technologies are introduced. I often get the question from people working at the trade union, how can we use that framework in the context of AI, of robots, of new technologies in general? And for me, it's, okay, start referring to those kinds of provisions because they're already there. The employers have to comply to these obligations, of course. And then the question is, how can you enforce those principles?
Are employers legally required to let their employees know that these frameworks exist? Or
normally they should know it.
Okay, yeah.
yeah, normally, because we have also, of course, the collective perspective as well. So workers' representatives, trade unions, are being part of the social dialogue in companies as well. So they can be the voice of workers to ask for information. So that's a first perspective. Also the training part as well. If new technology is introduced, it brings risks that have to be addressed, and workers need to be trained and to be informed about and consulted about these risks. So they need to have information on the functioning of these systems. And in my opinion, in my experience until now, that's the main part, that workers are not aware of these kind of mechanisms that they can use to have to gain information on this topic.
I see Ms. Gabriels wants to chime in on that.
Yes, because I also think that's one of the most important things, but also for unions. We have to have the knowledge ourselves internally, because if we don't have the knowledge, how can we disperse it to others? So that's one of it, but transparency and information. And I think there is a legal framework for that, but we don't use it. There is collective bargaining, for example, 39, that it's a very old collective bargaining agreement, but that agreement states that working councils and representatives have to be informed about what can have any new technology that can have an effect on them. And we don't use it. It has not been used very much before AI also, but we can use it. We also have collective bargaining agreements about surveillance. So we can use those things. You have the AI Act about AI literacy. So that means that an employer is responsible. It is not, it's only a framework, but we can do something with that framework, because an employer has to educate his people, his employees, to gain knowledge about AI and the systems that are there. And I think it's also important that the climate we have now today is that many employers say it's my decision, it's an economical decision to impose AI or technology. It's not a decision of the workers, and that's not true.
Say this were to be applied more, isn't the danger then that that layoffs can happen because of that? That they're asked workers to, hey, do these trainings on AI, and that eventually at the performance evaluation becomes, yeah, well, this worker is not open to innovation anymore, to change of it anymore, so we had to let this person go.
Okay, but it can be on different levels. Before the implementation of certain AI tools or technology, you don't only inform, you consult, you talk with the working councils before you give your plans to them. You be transparent about where you want to go with your company. And you let the workers think with you. I think that's very important. In working councils also, you let them think with you. Because at that moment, you create a platform where, and that is what unions are also. They are platforms to discuss things and to negotiate. And then you have that role again. If there is the information and the advice, and you meet each other on a same level, and it also means respect. It will be also better for the well-being of the worker because he knows he is listened to. But you, as an employer, you have to listen also then. Listening is not doing. And then you can structure. And together you come to decisions and also the transparency. And then you will have workers who are much more enthusiastic about using, for example, AI to bring new ideas. And then it doesn't has to be a threat. Now it is so, because people don't know. Mm-hmm. And I think if you do that, give them knowledge, share knowledge, it will be much better, and it will make, it can make a success. It can be a key to success also for the employer to implement it like that. Because then, otherwise it has always a big cost. And if you lose or it doesn't work out, mm-hmm. it is also negative for your company. And if you have more possibility to success, you need unions, social dialogue, representatives. So I think unions are much more needed again than ever.
Yeah.
Can I
apologize, Ms. Khundakji wanted to chime in first.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on this point about what we have been saying, and I think Michele said it earlier, is any introduction to new working environments, including technology, has to be done through joint efforts or mechanisms. It has to be through workers' voice, through the unions, in addition to the company. Because the last thing, I mean, that point about what's the risk? The risk is that there will be two-tier workers, two different levels of workers, the so-called skilled workers and the non or the less skilled workers. And this is the last thing that we want. We actually are calling for everyone has the right to be upskilled and reskilled according to any introduction of new technology. And then we can look at, are these people capable or not? We can assess. But just bringing in newcomers, saying these folks are, strongly skilled when it comes to technology, so we will lose half of the remaining task force or workforce. This is exactly what we are trying to say. It should not be the case. This is why the unions, but the governments need to support this initiative. It's actually a multi-stakeholder issue, because the government needs to set these standards, companies need to follow, and union needs to push and ensure that these are enforced. So it's a collective effort to ensure that we are actually creating unity rather than more division based on the skills level of workers.
Yes, and I also think, and that is the nature of technology per se, is that you cannot be say skilled at the technology because you will be skilled at technology at this point in time, but every worker will probably always have to upscale their skills, right? Yeah. Now, due to algorithms, due to AI, there is a risk for unions, I believe, that there is a loss of collective bargaining power. So if you take a look at gig work, also algorithmic management, and that makes unionization harder. So what are steps to be taken there?
Do you want to start with the legal side?
Okay. No, you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I think we have to continue to support the collective bargaining approach, because it's all about protecting a sector that's outside the traditional sectors. So it starts with collective bargaining protections or dialogue. If we want to put it in different contexts, dialogue has to continue. We have to call for legal reforms. This is something that we have to have global standards that should tell us what technology should look like when it's being introduced. And I have to mention, this is maybe one of the good platforms to talk about this year and next year, the whole the system that works around technology is coming together this summer and next summer to talk about what a real instrument for workers, specifically in the platform sector, should look like at the ILO level. So we're looking at governments, employers, and workers to set an instrument, a tool that sets the standards for those workers. This is how important this issue has been. It has never been so fast than when a specific business model is being introduced, that within 4 or 5 years of its existence, it's put on the agenda of the International Labour Organization. But because of how big and critical it's become, it is set for this year and next year. And of course, there's a big debate about whether it should be a convention supplemented by a recommendation. Of course, the employers group are pushing for a recommendation. The workers are pushing for a convention. Everyone is trying to lobby their governments to go in the direction that they see is right. I have to mention that the feedback was it has been the highest level of responses coming from the employers group in this exercise around platform workers, because it's a game changer. It's a game changer for many of these companies who are saying that we want a level playing field. We are trying to say this is a level playing field, let's do it, but yet they are pushing in the direction that thinks about making money more before the workers who support the app that makes that money.
Thank you. We've talked a little bit more about algorithmic management, real-time performance management, these algorithms that are being used for that. Is there a legal framework for that to gain more insight in the fairness or how algorithms operate? Because oftentimes we don't, it's opaque.
So perhaps I can take this question. There is no specific framework on algorithmic management, of course. And that's a little bit, for me, the downside of for instance, we have a directive on platform work. And it has a nice chapter on algorithmic management, in my opinion, with specific provisions to give protection to platform workers. And in my opinion, it's a little bit a pity that it's not being introduced in other sectors as well, because we would really need to have a specific framework on that, explaining the more general principles that we can find now in the GDPR, for instance, and the data privacy documents, and as well as in the OSH principles as well, because you can see that it has, for instance, also the principles of risk assessment, but focused also on the psychosocial risks, the mental health aspect. And I think that's something that is now overlooked. More in general, I think what a possible way is to address algorithm management is also in the GDPR, because there is a prohibition on automated decision-making systems, but it has a very limited scope. Also, that has also been demonstrated by the Uber case law from before the Dutch courts. So it's not that evident to apply that principle or that provision on algorithmic management. But I think, again, we need to think about the OSH framework, because it's very general formulated. You have to assess every risk related to the work of workers. So I think that also includes the mental health aspects as well from that's being associated or with algorithmic management as well. So we can't base our provisions or protection on that kind of legislation.
Any one of you two want
I
to?
just can add a little bit about, not the legal side, of course, it's not my specific expertise, but just to say, when we're looking at the problems of algorithms in terms of managing the work, especially in the platform economy again, we're looking at systems, and we heard it in the morning, we are looking at systems that dictate real-time decisions. So basically we're saying assignments, job assignments, we're looking at ratings. Even how a worker or a rider, a driver is being rated is controlled by these algorithms and AI. And then we're looking at deactivations, which is also something, it's a worker's job. When a person is deactivated for half an hour, or even, that's the minimum, but then there's much more, without knowing why, without knowing what to do, this has impacts on this person's well-being, but also security and conditions. So it's all linked together, and we cannot we cannot live in a world where people are penalized through systems, through artificial intelligence. That's I guess, the key message that we're trying to say here. And what is the transparency? What is the process that defines X gets deactivated and Y doesn't if they do the same act? So it's all about transparency. It's all about understanding how these systems work and the right to speak to someone about it.
And yes, accountability. So knowing what went wrong and who is accountable, who can you talk to. Ms. Gabriels, you want to...
Yes, because one of the highest courts in France already made a decision that said that the algorithm and the decision of the algorithm can be the employer. So, therefore, it is not prohibited that the algorithm makes the decision. This is about the decision, that the algorithm says, because you were too late X times, for example, that you cannot start or you get off the app, you are thrown off the platform. And in France, they said that that was a justifiable way of managing a company. But it also gives the question and raises the question, and that was what they also said about the liability. There has to be an employer who is liable, there has to be a possibility to appeal against a decision, for example. There has to be a human in control at the end of the chain where you can go to. And I think it's very important that we use collective bargaining for that. Because if we have on a sectoral level or on a company level, we can have agreements for that. We can shape it. It's not the point of chasing AI or prohibiting those things, but to shape them. And we can do that via collective bargaining, at least while the legal framework is not there. And that's also a problem of globalization, because especially in platform, you don't know where the real employer is. You don't know where they are. So it's not like you can go to a court here. You can go to the court, of course, but it's difficult to hold somebody reliable. And it's also important for that we know the chain of the AI.
The court ruling that you are referring to in France, when exactly was it? Is it very recent or?
It was this year.
It was this year, okay. Because do you think that might be a precedent? Because it's big, right? That they say, okay, yeah, this is an algorithm that can actually be at the end point of. Sorry?
I think of course, that's a problem.
There were cases that workers and their union representing them were able to prove that they are being controlled by an app. And there were cases in certain countries where companies did have to pay back lots and lots of money to workers. There's a case in the UK and there's many others that I cannot recall right now, but this is one of the reasons why some of the companies have actually realized that they need to speak to the unions. They are getting a little bit worn out of the amount of money that they have been paying through litigation, through workers taking those companies to court and the unions that are backing them. So they are feeling the pressure, not enough, but there is pressure on them. But they are also, some companies, very little, are changing the way that they want to deal with workers and unions that represent them. We've seen a little bit of change, but companies, others are still in the same position that they are only an app. They have nothing to do with the sector as transport, that they are providing two sides. I think we heard the term before, two groups that they have to deal with, and that's the people who use the app as passengers and people who use it as workers. For us, these are employees. So that's which makes a massive difference in terms of what does that mean in terms of security, social conditions and security for them.
I think that touches a lot upon how unions can have more leverage in policy making, bargaining with international companies that consider themselves to be an app, so to speak, but then actually they're also an employer. So how, as a union, would you get more leverage?
I mean, this is, it's not I don't think there's an easy answer to this. It all depends. From a global perspective, we have to be backed by, the way we did it is through campaigning. We have to put pressure. Pressuring the companies that did get us some positive results. Even with the companies that we ended up talking to, they felt unions on the ground, our affiliates on the ground were taking action and naming them and shaming them publicly. You know, at the end of the day, they do care about what their customers and their passengers will think about them. So we had to use different kind of strategies. We went for air war campaigns. There were national activities on the ground. And then some of these companies realized, okay, what you are calling for, there is space for us to talk about some of those things. You know, even if we disagree on some points, but we can still talk on how do we improve their deactivation process, how do we improve some of the issues that they are facing day to day. There was access to the unions to some of their organizing hubs, their drivers hubs, so this also empowers our affiliates in increasing their union membership and representing these workers. It's not a finished article, we're nowhere near being, you know, there yet. But it's steps towards trying to improve the lives of these people who use those apps and are influenced heavily by technology.
Mm-hmm. Any one of you two who want to?
I think it's also important that as unions we are knowledge centra. We have to build our knowledge for ourselves, but also to be visible and stand by the workers. We have to be visible for workers. We have to be also for the platform workers. They have to see us as unions, as persons that will help them. I think that's very important. The knowledge centre, like I told, we can give education too. We have educational programs about lots of things. So also about collective bargaining and about the rights of workers and stuff like that. So we can educate them, make them AI literate. Think about those things, but also weighing and make it visible that we are weighing on the legal framework, because we have the social partners in labor law have to have a voice in the making of laws or the adjustments of laws. So I think many people don't know that. But it's important if they know that they also backing them up. It's very important.
Yes, please.
Yeah, perhaps I can just say something else about this point, because indeed it's, I think, I'm not an industrial relation expert or something, but I think indeed it's important that trade unions create awareness about AI in the workplaces. And as we have been talking today, you can see that AI has different kinds of formulations or different kinds of aspects that is very sectoral specific. And I think that's important that also as trade unions that you also raise awareness, that you give information to members, also education, because then they are aware that if an employer says, I want to introduce a new software or a tool or whatever, that they have the feeling that, okay, wait, we have all these kinds of rights that we can use that to get more information to see what the consequences are. I think that's also an important.
And educating the representatives in the working councils. And Frank told me that when asked to companies or to representatives, is there any AI or in your company, that many of them say, no, there is not. Only a few say we have AI. But it's already full of it. Everyone who has even a smartphone or whatever has it. And in many companies, they search like on ChatGPT and so on. But there are no policies. I don't think many employers know how a problem this can be for themselves also.
So on one hand, it stays very invisible, the fact that AI is being applied. Maybe on the other hand, it just might be like we have said here before, that workers don't really think that they can accede to unions for these AI questions. Does that maybe have to do anything with image, that we associate unions maybe more with bargaining about work hours, about fair wages, about good pensions, and not exactly with technological advancements?
We have to, in Dutch you say, put yourself on the chart. So I think we have to do that. We have to go out with this, sensibilize, but say we have knowledge. We are here and we are here to stay.
And they have been asking for this. I mean, even from a person who works in that space in a global union federation, I can see the number of interest that is rising amongst our union leaders as well. Not just the workers or shop steward level, but also the leaders asking to be made aware of what does it really mean, how do I negotiate this, and why do we need to be aware of A, B, and C, all the issues that we have been talking about. We have been running out of our Congress, and I think we might hear a little bit about this tomorrow, but one of the global 6 demands is preparing for the future of work. And it's not a future anymore. It's here, it's with us, and we have to prepare, we have to share the expertise and knowledge. When AI is introduced in a warehouse, what does it also mean for someone who is sitting or doing long-haul trucking? What does it mean for someone who is on a plane doing, a flight or cabin crew as a job? So it's understanding what does it mean for a transport worker and the unions that represent them, to empower them to negotiate this on the ground with the right stakeholders, whether it's the companies, the employers, or the governments as well. So this is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Taes?
Perhaps I can add also to that, because I think it's also related to that technology is now being introduced in sectors that traditionally were not confronted with that kind of new technologies. For instance, we have the PCs and so on, but now we can see that AI is getting introduced in every sector, and I think that's also part of being aware that AI can also affect the more traditional sectors. We have, of course, the gig economy, but I think there the people are more aware of what it means to be working for an app, instead of, for instance, someone in a warehouse, because those persons can say like, what does it mean, or what kind of consequences it's had. Sometimes that's also something that's not being completely clear then for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we can use AI ourselves also within the union to reach people.
Yes, yes. AI can
and
be
to
used
inform and to sensibilize.
When it's ready and it doesn't do hallucinations.
Yes.
You have to get the temperature right.
Because unfortunately that's a feature of generative AI. Now we have touched upon a lot of subjects, a lot of important points. Now if we look at priorities, what would you then see is the priority for a trade union when it comes to AI? Which would you tackle first? Which AI problem?
I think, again, introducing AI generally, there isn't one single problem. Without having clear laws of how it should be basically operationalized from a worker's perspective is the biggest priority. I think having the right standards whether it's on national level or global level, is the most important thing. And it has to be something that works for everyone. You know, we're not, I have to say this at the end, I don't know if I will have the time for another intervention, but I have to say we support responsible innovation. This is something that should be useful to all of us, to companies, but also to workers and their lives. But we must work with all the stakeholders to reach the desired, basically, productivity, not on the workers' expense. This is the fundamental message that we are trying to say. So we want our workers to lead this transition, not be the casualties. This is Frank Morel's style of finishing, concluding. So we don't want the workers to be the casualties, and we have to be experts in how we deal with this, as we were saying.
Now you are mentioning that there is a real need, that the priority would be the legal framework, but I've also heard that the legal framework, that there actually is already a rudimentary legal framework, but that workers don't always know, or unions don't always, unions do, but that workers don't always know that they can make use of that framework. How do we bridge that gap?
Perhaps I'm not a trade unionist, so I don't know if it's my place to say what should the priority be for a trade union. But in my experience, if I talk to trade unions, it's more about setting out the strategy about how we can deal with AI in a specific sector. And for that, I think it's necessary to just have a map of what the kinds of uses of AI in that sector could be. And then you need to gain some information. And for that, you need the legal framework, but it's not that easy because it's a very general legal framework. But I think we can still use those information rights. That's mostly specific for at company level, but then it could be, for instance, a bottom-up approach to have information, expertise, and then you can give training to the members and also the workers' representatives as well. And then you can start to negotiate, but it's essential that you have the information and knowledge about these functioning of the systems that are being used.
So there is a framework, but it really has to become more industry specific, and yeah, okay.
It will be on a sectoral and a company level, and then it will have to go up. I think it's very correct.
You look at this, of course, from more of an academic perspective. What would you say should be the first thing that we really need to take a look at, or that we should really prioritize?
What I said, I think it's the essential part is what kind of AI is being used at the workplaces, because what you said is, I think it's true. If you go to an employer and you ask, do you use AI in your company? The answer will be, no, I don't use it. I never introduced it. But then it's important that you find the right ways to get information. And like I said, for instance, the GDPR, it requires that you have transparency in terms of the data, personal data that you process of your workers. And normally it should be there. If it's not there, what kind of processing that, for instance, an employer uses, the employer is not compliant to GDPR. And then you can have other procedures, but if it's a good employer, a good intentional employer, then you can start to negotiate, or you can start to talk about the use of AI in the company, at company level, and then you get information on how it's being used at sectoral level, because I think it's very diverse how it's being used from each sector. So that's why I think it's not a general framework that you can use. Okay, that's the use of AI, how we can use it in the companies. I think it should be focused on sectorals, because I think in transport it will be different than in logistics or the gig economy. So I think it's very specific that you need to find ways to address it, how it's being used in companies.
Would you, Ms. Gabriels, maybe like to make a last remark?
It will be almost the same, but I think the most important is building knowledge, building awareness, and reinforce our representative and our own people, and carry that out to others with, and then people will also, if they see we are a reliable partner, people will come to us too. Quality.
I think that's a good one to end the debate with. Thank you all so much, Mrs. Khundakji, Mr. Taes, and Mrs. Gabriels, for this interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.